You know, when the Airbus A320 first came out, it was, without a doubt, the most sophisticated passenger jet in the world. It was supposed to kick off a brand new era of safety, all thanks to automation. But its public debut? It turned into an absolute calamity, a huge embarrassment that honestly put the entire future of Airbus in jeopardy. And the whole mess started with a question that, frankly, still haunts aviation today.
So imagine this. You have this brand new, revolutionary jet, and within just 4 years, 2 of them crash. Investigators, airlines, and of course, a terrified public, they were all asking the exact same question. Was this just pilot error? Or was there something fundamentally, dangerously wrong with this new plane?
At the very heart of this mystery was a new technology called fly-by-wire. Now, for the first time ever in a civilian jet, the pilot wasn't, directly flying the plane. It's more like they were flying a computer, and the computer was flying the plane. And here's the kicker. That computer had the final say. It was designed to literally stop pilots from making dangerous mistakes. This completely changed the relationship between the human and the machine in the cockpit.
All right, so let's dive into our first case file. We're going to the A320's public debut, where this brand new human-machine relationship got tested under the absolute worst circumstances. The date is June 26, 1988. Air France is showing off its third ever A320 at this little air show in Habsheim, France. And on board you've got 130 passengers, many of them on their very first flight, all ready to see something spectacular. The flight was only supposed to be 5 minutes long. That's it. The plan, which was put together by one of Air France's most respected pilots, Captain Michel Asselineau, was to do this really breathtaking low and slow flyby. But they saw the tiny airfield way too late, and that forced them to rush the whole descent. Just as Captain Asselineau leveled off for the pass, he finally saw something that wasn't on his flight plan, a forest sitting right in his path. He slammed the throttles to full power, but it was just too late.
Now, the plan was a 100-foot flyover, which, by the way, was already against regulations. But the flight data recorder, it told a way more shocking story. The plane was flying at just 30 feet. One passenger later said, "You could see the grass right out your window." I mean, how could a pilot with this much experience be so dangerously low and apparently not even know it?
In the aftermath, 2 completely different stories pop up. The official investigation basically said, look, it was pilot error. They flew too low, too slow, and they completely botched a rushed approach. But Captain Asselineau? He mounted a fierce defense. He claimed his instruments were wrong, the engines didn't spool up in time, and, this is the shocking part, that the fly-by-wire computer actually fought him, pushing the nose down when he was pulling back to climb. He even claimed there was a massive cover-up, that the black boxes had been tampered with to protect Airbus.
But in the end, the investigators actually recreated the flight. And what they found was that the plane's computers did exactly what they were supposed to do. When Asselineau pulled back hard at that low speed, the system kicked in its stall protection, lowering the nose to stop the plane from losing lift and just dropping out of the sky. So the verdict was in. Captain Asselineau was convicted of involuntary homicide. But for a lot of people, this whole debate about the fly-by-wire system, it was far from over.
Yeah, that debate was far from settled. And our second case file, just 4 years later, would add a crucial and really tragic new piece to the mystery. On a cold January night in 1992, another A320 was on approach to Strasbourg. But this time, there was no air show, no risky stunts, just a routine flight that was about to end in disaster.
You gotta understand, the crew was in a tough spot here. They were veteran pilots for sure, but they were brand new to the A320. The captain only had 162 hours in the plane. Then a last-minute runway change forced them into what's called a non-precision approach, which basically means the autopilot isn't going to help you with your altitude. And to top it all off, the captain had never flown this specific approach in this specific aircraft before. The cockpit voice recorder actually captured how anxious he was.
So the pressure's on, and the pilots have to manually program the plane's rate of descent. And it was right here, in this interaction with the A320's new, shiny digital interface, that a tiny moment of confusion led to a catastrophic mistake.
The captain figured out they needed a safe descent angle of 3.3 degrees. Okay, that's the number he was trying to put into the flight computer. A nice, gentle, totally standard slope for a landing.
But that's not what the autopilot registered. Not even close. Instead of a 3.3-degree angle, the plane was programmed to descend at 3,300 feet per minute. Now, this happened because of a really critical design flaw. See, the same little screen was used for two totally different modes. In flight path angle mode, the 3.3 degrees you wanted just showed up as 3.3. But in vertical speed mode, a descent of 3,300 feet per minute was abbreviated to 33. A simple misread, and suddenly the plane was diving at the mountains 10 times faster than it was supposed to.
This is just a classic example of how disasters are almost never caused by just one thing. It's a chain of events. That confusing interface, that was just the first link. Then you get this dose of terrible luck. At the exact split second the pilot commanded the descent, a random gust of wind pushed the plane up for a moment. The autopilot saw this, thought it was an emergency, and commanded an even faster dive. And the final, tragic link in that chain, the airline had decided not to install a ground proximity warning system, so the crew never got that automated pull-up alarm before they slammed into the mountain. So, we've looked at two very different crashes with the same new aircraft. What's the final verdict here? Was it the pilot, or was it the plane? Well, when you actually lay out the evidence from both cases side by side like this, you start to see a pattern, right? In Habsheim, you had a risky human decision that was met with a protective computer override that, well, didn't really help. In Strasbourg, you had pilot inexperience hitting up against a confusing interface and a missing safety feature. In both cases, the simple answer of pilot or plane, it just doesn't work.
So ultimately, the verdict wasn't pilot or plane. It was pilot and plane. The real problem was this new, complicated, and not yet fully understood partnership between them. These tragedies really expose the hidden dangers that pop up when human intuition and machine logic don't perfectly mesh. The plane was designed to be safer, sure, but its very complexity created new and totally unexpected ways for things to go horribly wrong.
You know, there's this old saying in aviation that just perfectly sums up the lesson here. Even in the most automated cockpit in the world, the pilot's brain, their awareness, their preparation, that's still the most critical safety system on board. Technology can help, absolutely, but it can't replace a pilot's ability to anticipate and understand what's coming next.
But here's the thing. The story doesn't just end with the wreckage. These two disasters, as awful as they were, they forced the entire aviation industry to face these new challenges head-on, and that led to a legacy of safety that all of us benefit from today. The changes were direct and they were decisive. That autopilot display that doomed the Strasbourg flight, it was immediately redesigned so there was no ambiguity. Ground proximity warning systems became mandatory on all airliners. The training requirements to become an A320 pilot were dramatically increased, and the rules for demonstration flights completely overhauled. Hard lessons were learned, and they were put into practice fast. And the result of all these hard-learned lessons? It's pretty clear. The A320, an aircraft that was literally born from controversy and tragedy, went on to become one of the most successful and safest airliners ever built. That painful process of investigating these crashes and really understanding that complex dance between pilot and plane, it ultimately made flying safer for everyone. Which kind of leaves us with one final thought, right? These crashes happened over 30 years ago, basically at the dawn of digital aviation. Today, automation is everywhere, in our cars, in our operating rooms. As these systems get smarter and more complex, the lessons from Habsheim and Strasbourg are more relevant than ever. How do we make sure that this partnership between us and our machines remains a safe one?